On my 32nd birthday, my stepmother slapped me across the face in front of the whole family, convinced she was punishing an ungrateful daughter. She didn't realize the cake sitting on the table between us was actually a legal landmine. Beneath the layers of sweet buttercream and fondant, I had printed the evidence that would destroy her. Tonight wasn't a celebration. It was her arraignment wrapped in sugar. My name is Natalie Pierce, and today I turned 32 years old. Most people wake up on their birthday hoping for a surprise party or a quiet dinner with friends. I woke up hoping that the encrypted backup files on my private server were fully synced and that the two battery-operated microcameras I had hidden in my purse were fully charged. I live alone in a 2-bedroom condo in Lakeview Heights, a quiet suburb just outside of Cleveland where the lawns are manicured to within an inch of their lives, and the neighbors watch everything from behind beige curtains. It is a sanctuary I built for myself, brick by brick, overtime shift by overtime shift. I had just clocked out from a 12-hour shift at Northline Cyber Defense. My eyes felt like they were packed with sand, gritty and dry, but my mind was humming with that specific, cold clarity that comes from working in cybersecurity. You learn to look for patterns. You learn that a system is most vulnerable when it thinks it is safe. And you learn that the most dangerous breaches do not come from a stranger hacking a firewall. They come from someone inside the network holding a password you gave them. I drove to my father's house with the windows down, letting the cool Ohio air slap me awake. I told myself this would be the year I finally severed the connection, but first, I had to attend the party. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked like a stage set for a sitcom about a happy American family. There were balloons tied to the mailbox, bobbing aggressively in the wind. A banner that read, "Happy Birthday" in glittering gold letters was strung across the porch. To a stranger, it looked welcoming. To me, it looked like bait. Elaine, my stepmother, had outdone herself. She had transformed the living room into a shrine of forced celebration. There were streamers twisted into spirals, a table laden with finger foods that looked too perfect to eat, and a crowd of people buzzing with low, murmured conversation. I stepped through the door and the atmosphere shifted instantly. It was a physical sensation, like walking into a room where the air conditioning had been cranked down to freezing. My father, Robert, was standing by the fireplace, nursing a drink. He looked older than his 60 years. His shoulders slumped as if the weight of the house was pressing down on him. He offered me a weak, apologetic smile, the kind that says I am sorry, but not sorry enough to stop this. Then there was the audience. Elaine had invited everyone, her sister, Aunt Linda, who always looked at me like I was a stain on the carpet, the neighbors from 3 houses down, who loved gossip more than oxygen, a few of Elaine's friends from her church group, and of course, her biological children, my step-siblings, Kayla and Dylan. Kayla was sitting on the arm of the sofa, scrolling through her phone, looking bored but smug. Dylan gave me a nod that was barely a twitch of his chin. They were not here to celebrate me. They were here to witness the charity of Elaine Pierce. "Natalie, you made it!" Elaine's voice cut through the room, high-pitched and dripping with performative sweetness. She rushed over, wearing a floral dress that cost more than my weekly grocery budget, and wrapped me in a hug that felt like a constrictor snake sizing up its prey. "We were worried you would be too busy with your important job to come see your family." "I would not miss it. Elaine," I said, my voice steady. I kept my hands at my sides. She pulled back, her hands lingering on my arms just a second too long, her nails digging in slightly. She turned to the room, beaming. "Everyone, look. The birthday girl is finally here. We should be grateful she could spare the time for us simple folks, right?" A ripple of polite, uncomfortable laughter went through the room. I could feel the eyes on me. I knew exactly what they were seeing, because I knew exactly what Elaine had told them, to them. I was the ungrateful daughter, the one who had manipulated her sick father into buying her a luxury condo, the one who hoarded the family wealth while Kayla's small business struggled and Dylan drove a beat-up car. I was the villain in the soap opera Elaine had been writing for 15 years. I walked further into the room, keeping my posture straight. I did not defend myself. I did not roll my eyes. I just observed. That was the mistake they always made with me. They thought my silence was submission. They did not realize I was gathering data. "Happy birthday, Nat," Kayla said, not looking up from her screen. "Nice watch? New?" "Old," I lied. It was an Apple Watch Ultra. And right now, the voice memo app was running in the background, picking up every whisper in the room. "Must be nice," Aunt Linda muttered loud enough for me to hear. "To buy whatever you want while your parents worry about the heating bill." I ignored her and moved toward the corner of the room near the bookshelf, while pretending to admire a framed photo of my father. I slipped the first miniature camera out of my pocket and wedged it between two hardcover thrillers. The lens was the size of a pinhead. Pointing directly at the center of the room, I placed the second one on the mantel while setting down my keys. The trap was set. For the next hour, I endured the performance. Elaine paraded me around like a prize pony she was planning to sell to the glue factory. She made backhanded compliments about my simple outfit, contrasting it with how much they spent on the party. She brought up my mother, my biological mother, saying how she would be so sad to see us drifting apart, using the dead to guilt the living. "We just want you to know, Natalie," Elaine said, standing in the center of the room, holding a glass of cheap wine, "that no matter how much you push us away, no matter how much you want to keep for yourself, we are still family. We forgive you." I took a sip of water to hide the smirk threatening to break through my composure. "Forgive me. It was masterful gaslighting." Then came the cake. Elaine clapped her hands. "Okay, everyone. Time for the main event. Dylan, help me bring it out." They disappeared into the kitchen and returned a moment later carrying a massive sheet cake. It was elaborate, covered in thick swirls of white buttercream and silver edible pearls. It was easily a $200 cake. As they set it down on the coffee table, I leaned in. The guests crowded around, phones out, ready to capture the happy moment for social media. I looked at the writing on the cake. My breath hitched, not from shock, but from the sheer audacity of it. I had to blink to make sure I was seeing it right. Then, I remembered my role. I widened my eyes. I put a hand to my chest. I gave them the reaction they wanted. Surprise. But behind my hand, my jaw was set like granite. "Oh, Elaine," I said softly, "you really shouldn't have." "Read it," Elaine urged, looking around at her guests, her eyes shining with malice disguised as pride. The guests leaned in. The text was intricate, scripted in dark chocolate icing against the white background. Elaine cleared her throat, silencing the room. She placed a hand on my shoulder, her grip heavy. "Before you blow out the candles, Natalie, I want to say something. We know things have been complicated. We know you wanted your independence. When your father and I put up the money for your apartment in Lakeview Heights, we did it out of love. We sacrificed our savings because we wanted you to be safe. And even though you have blocked our calls and changed the locks, we want you to know that we are still here. We are still your safety net." The room murmured with sympathy. Someone whispered, "She is a saint." My father looked at his shoes. He knew the truth. He knew they hadn't put a single dime into my apartment. He knew I had worked 3 jobs and secured the loan entirely on my own credit. But he said nothing. His silence was his signature on the lie. "So," Elaine continued, her voice hardening just a fraction, "I have a little gift, just a formality, really." She reached under the coffee table and pulled out a manila envelope. She slapped it down next to the cake. "Since we are all family here, and since your father's heart condition has been worrying us, we think it is best if we handle the paperwork to protect the asset. This is just a standard joint tenancy agreement. It adds my name and your father's name to the deed of the apartment, just for safekeeping. So if anything happens to you, the bank doesn't take it." She uncapped a pen and held it out to me. "Sign it, honey. Let's eat cake." The room went deadly silent. This was the ambush, an audience of witnesses, the pressure of a generous gift, the guilt of a sick father. all designed to force me into signing away my property. I looked at the pen. Then I looked at Elaine. "No," I said. The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Elaine's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "I said no," I repeated, my voice calm, projecting clearly for the microphone on my wrist. "I paid for the apartment. The loan is in my name. The down payment came from my account. You did not contribute a single dollar. Elaine, I am not signing over ownership to you." The sympathy in the room evaporated, replaced by shock. I could feel the guests shifting, exchanging glances. This wasn't the script. Elaine's face turned a mottled shade of red. The mask was slipping. "How dare you?" she hissed, low enough that the back of the room couldn't hear, but loud enough for me. "After everything I have done? You ungrateful little brat!" "I am not signing," I said again. "You are going to sign it!" Elaine screamed, her voice cracking. "You think you are better than us? You think you can just take our money and run? You live there because of me. You survive because of me." She lunged. It happened in slow motion. I saw her hand come up. I saw the flash of gold from her rings. I could have blocked it. I have taken self-defense classes. I know how to redirect force, but I didn't move. I needed this. I needed the contact. Her palm connected hard with the side of my face. The sound was a sharp, wet thwack that echoed off the high ceilings. The force of it knocked me back a step, and I stumbled, catching myself on the edge of the table. My cheek burned like fire. Gasps erupted from the guests. "Elaine!" my father shouted, finally stepping forward, but he was too late. Elaine stood there, chest heaving, hands still raised. She looked wild, desperate. The carefully curated image of the loving stepmother shattered into 1,000 pieces. I slowly straightened up. I could taste blood inside my lip. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. It was pounding with the thrill of execution. I touched my cheek, then checked my watch. The red waveform on the screen was pulsing, recording active. The room was frozen. No one knew what to do. They were waiting for me to cry, or to scream, or to hit her back. They were waiting for the impulsive, unstable daughter Elaine had warned them about. Instead, I smoothed the front of my blouse. I looked at my father, who was pale as a ghost. I looked at Kayla, whose mouth was hanging open, and then I looked at Elaine, locking eyes with her. "If you want to know who really paid for the apartment," I said, my voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel, "and if you want to know why I am never signing those papers, read the cake." Elaine blinked, confused. "What?" "Read the cake, Elaine." The guests, driven by an instinctual curiosity that overpowered their shock, drifted closer. A few phones were raised, cameras zooming in. On the screen of the nearest smartphone, the image on the cake came into sharp focus. The white frosting was not just decorative. The dark chocolate script was not a birthday wish. It was a precise, high-resolution edible print transferred onto the fondant. It wasn't a message from a mother to a daughter. It was a bank ledger, and below it, a single sentence written in perfect cursive. "Happy birthday to the only legal owner of Unit 17B." As the guests squinted at the numbers and the text, the air in the room changed from confusion to a dawning, horrified realization. The flashback hit me then, dragging me away from the candlelight and the stinging pain in my cheek, pulling me back to where the first lie began, to understand why a cake had to become a subpoena. You have to go back 12 months. You have to go back to the distinct, metallic taste of guilt that brought me back to Cleveland in the first place. I was living in Chicago then, working as a senior analyst for a logistics firm. I had a life that fit into 2 suitcases and a high-rise apartment with a view of the lake that cost me $3,000 a month. It was a sterile, lonely, but beautifully independent life. Then came the call. My father, Robert, had been diagnosed with a heart condition, atrial fibrillation, coupled with stress-induced hypertension. The doctor said he needed rest. Elaine said he needed me. She did not say it directly. Of course, Elaine never asked for things. She implied them until the air in the room was so thick with obligation that you suffocated if you did not volunteer. She called me on a Tuesday night, her voice trembling with a curated fragility. She told me the medical bills were piling up. She told me the house felt too big and too empty. She told me my father sat in his armchair staring at the driveway, wondering why his successful daughter was too busy to visit. So, I packed up. I transferred to the North Line Cyber Defense Branch in Ohio. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was doing the right thing. The dynamic in the Pierce household had been set in stone 2 decades ago. Elaine entered my life when I was 12, 3 years after my mother died. She did not come in as the wicked stepmother of fairy tales. She did not lock me in the attic or force me to scrub floors with a toothbrush. Her cruelty was far more modern, far more American. It was bureaucratic. It was emotional accounting. From the day she married my father, she operated on the premise that I was a liability she had graciously agreed to acquire. She had 2 children of her own, Kayla and Dylan, who were toddlers then, to Elaine. Marrying a man with a teenage daughter was an act of supreme charity. I was the debt my father brought into the marriage, and by extension, I was a debt that I had to spend the rest of my life paying off. Throughout my 20s, while I was putting myself through college and climbing the corporate ladder, I sent money home. It started small. $500 for a car repair, $200 for groceries when Dylan needed braces. But as my salary grew, so did the emergencies. There was the time the roof leaked in the middle of winter. I sent $8,000. There was the time credit card debt from unforeseen family expenses threatened to sink their credit score. I wired $12,000. I thought I was helping. I thought I was being a good daughter. It was not until I moved back that I realized how Elaine had framed these transactions to the world. I remember a barbecue in the backyard. Just 2 weeks after I returned from Chicago, we were standing by the grill, my father flipping burgers with a hand that shook slightly from his medication. A neighbor, Mrs. Gable, leaned in to talk to me. She was a nice woman, holding a paper plate of potato salad. "It is so wonderful that you are back, Natalie," Mrs. Gable said, beaming. "Elaine was just telling us how hard the whole family worked to pay for that roof last year. It is a blessing that you all chip in together. One big pot, right?" I froze. I looked at Elaine, who was busy pouring lemonade across the patio. She caught my eye and offered a tight, warning smile. To the world, my checks were not my contributions. They were family money. In Elaine's narrative, I was not the savior. I was just a member of the collective. And every dollar I earned belonged to the corporation of Elaine Pierce. That should have been my first red flag, but I ignored it. I was focused on my goal, buying my own place. I had been saving for 5 years. I wanted a condo in Lakeview Heights. It was close enough to check on my father, but far enough that Elaine could not just drop by without calling. I found the perfect unit. 2 bedrooms, a balcony, secure underground parking. The price was $320,000. When I got the pre-approval letter from the bank, I was ecstatic. I brought a bottle of champagne to my father's house to celebrate. We sat around the dining table. Me, Dad, Elaine, and Kayla. Dylan was out with friends. "I got approved," I said, sliding the letter across the table to my father. "I am putting the offer in tomorrow. It is all happening." My father put on his reading glasses. "That is great, honey, really great. Interest rates are high right now. Though, can you handle the monthly?" I calculated it. "Dad, I am fine. I have the 20% down payment ready in my savings." Elaine picked up the letter. She did not smile. She scanned the numbers with the cold precision of an auditor. "It is a lot of money for one person," Elaine said, placing the paper back down. "Just you? All alone in that big apartment?" "It is an investment," I explained. "Better than renting." Elaine sighed, the sound of a martyr being forced to explain the obvious. "Natalie, listen to me. You are single. You are young. What if you lose your job? What if you want to get married and move away again? It is risky to have all this debt in just your name." "I can handle it," I said, feeling defensive. "We were thinking," Elaine said, using the royal we that always silenced my father, "that it would be safer if you put your father's name on the deed. You know, just as a backup, and maybe Kayla's too." I choked on my champagne. "Kayla? Why would I put Kayla on my mortgage?" Kayla looked up from her pasta, shrugging. "Mom says I need to build credit. My spa business is struggling a bit, and having an asset would help me refinance my business loan." "Absolutely not," I said. "This is my house, my loan. It is for the family." "Natalie!" Elaine's voice rose, sharp and sudden. "Your father is sick. If something happens to you, do you want the bank to take the house, or do you want your family to have it? We need a place where your father can feel secure, a place for Kayla to land if her business goes under. Why are you so selfish?" I looked at my father. I pleaded with him silently to step in, to tell his wife that asking for a share of my hard-earned property was insane. He took a long sip of his water. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had surrendered decades ago. "Natalie," he said softly, "just listen to your mother. She understands these things. She's just worried about paperwork. She knows the laws better than we do." He did not believe that. He just wanted the arguing to stop. He wanted peace, even if the price of that peace was my financial autonomy. I held my ground that night. I told them no. I bought the condo in my name alone. I signed the closing papers with a shaking hand, feeling a rush of triumph. But Elaine did not give up. She just changed tactics. A month later, I had just moved in. Boxes were everywhere. I was exhausted, working 60 hours a week at the new job and trying to unpack on weekends. Elaine invited me over for a congratulations dinner. When I arrived, the mood was disturbingly festive. She had invited Aunt Linda and Uncle Jerry. She made a roast. She poured expensive wine. "To Natalie," Elaine toasted, raising her glass high. "And to the new apartment. We are so proud that we could all come together to make this happen." I paused with my glass halfway to my mouth. "We could all come together?" "It is a beautiful place," Aunt Linda chirped. "Elaine told me how you guys moved some funds around to help Natalie with the down payment. That is what family is for." My blood ran cold. Elaine was staring at me, daring me to correct her, daring me to humiliate her in front of her sister and ruin the dinner. She knew I wouldn't do it. She knew I was too polite, too desperate to keep my father's stress levels down. So I swallowed the wine and the lie together. "Thank you," I said, the words tasting like ash. After dinner, while Kayla and Aunt Linda were watching television and my father was dozing in his chair, Elaine cleared the table. She pulled a folder from the kitchen drawer. "Oh, Natalie," she said casually, "before you go, I was talking to our insurance broker. Since you are so busy with the new job, and since your father is technically listed as your emergency contact, we need to sort out some administrative things, for the condo insurance and the property tax filings." She placed a stack of papers in front of me. "I can handle my own taxes." "Elaine," I said, rubbing my temples. I had been up since 5 in the morning. I know, she soothed, walking behind me and massaging my shoulders. Her hands felt heavy. "But your father worries. He wants to make sure everything is filed correctly so you do not get audited. This just lets me talk to the insurance company for you. It lets me drop off the tax documents at the city hall, so you do not have to take time off work. It is just a help, honey, just a convenience." I looked at the top page. It looked standard. Authorization for release of information. "It is just so you do not have to worry," she whispered. "Let us help you. You do so much for us. Let us do the paperwork." I was tired. I was so incredibly tired of fighting. I wanted to go home to my new bed. I wanted to believe that they actually cared about me. I wanted to believe that this was an olive branch, a way for her to feel useful without taking my money. "Just the insurance and taxes?" I asked. "Just the boring stuff," she promised. I flipped to the second page. I skimmed it. I saw words like filing and correspondence. I did not flip to the third page. If I had, I would have seen the paragraph tucked at the bottom. The paragraph that granted the unauthorized agent the power to act on behalf of the principal regarding all real estate assets, banking institutions, and lending agreements. I picked up the pen. "Okay," I said. "Thanks, Elaine." I signed my name. Once, twice, 3 times. Elaine watched me. She did not smile. She did not gloat. She just watched the ink dry with a terrifying intensity. As soon as I put the pen down, she slid the folder away and closed it. "Good," she said. "Now your father can sleep at night." I left that night feeling lighter, thinking I had offloaded a few chores. I did not know I had just handed her the keys to my life. The realization did not come all at once. It was a slow creep. Over the next 6 months, whenever I visited, Elaine would make subtle comments. "Our apartment is increasing in value," she would say to a guest. "We are thinking of redoing the kitchen in the condo," she would tell a contractor friend. I brushed it off as her usual narcissism. I thought she was just claiming emotional ownership. I did not know she was claiming legal ownership. The turning point came on the day I fully moved the last of my things from storage. I had invited them over to see the finished place. I had painted the walls a soft gray. I had bought a new leather sofa. It finally felt like mine. Elaine walked in. She did not take off her shoes. She walked through the living room, running her hand along the back of my sofa. She walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge. She walked into my bedroom and looked at the bed. She stood in the doorway of my bedroom, looking around with a critical eye. She did not look like a guest. She looked like a landlord inspecting a tenant. "It is nice," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. "Kayla would love a room like this. Her apartment is so dark." "Well, Kayla can buy her own place," I said, trying to keep the mood light. Elaine turned to me. Her eyes were flat, hard stones. "We all do what we have to do to survive. Natalie, some of us just have to work harder for it." She smiled then, but it didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile of possession. It was the smile of someone who knew a secret that could burn my world to the ground. "By the way," she added, "did you get the mail I sent over? The bank had some questions about the insurance." "I have not checked," I said. "Do not worry," she said. "I took care of it." I felt a shiver run down my spine, a primal warning system flaring up, but I pushed it down. I was a cybersecurity expert. I protected billion-dollar networks. I told myself I was paranoid to think my own stepmother was hacking my life. I was wrong. I was not paranoid enough. That was 1 year ago. That was before the letters started arriving. That was before I found out that the help I had signed for was actually a permission slip for theft. That was before I realized that in the eyes of my family, I was not a person, I was a resource, and they were ready to mine me until there was nothing left. The envelope looked innocent enough. It was a standard business size, crisp white, with a cellophane window that revealed my name and address. It sat on my kitchen counter, sandwiched between a flyer for a pizza place and a coupon book for car washes. I had just brewed my morning coffee, a dark roast that usually signaled the start of a productive day. The sun was streaming through the balcony doors of my apartment in Lakeview Heights, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I felt safe. I felt independent. I slit the envelope open with a butter knife, expecting a promotional offer or perhaps a notice about updated privacy policies. I pulled out the single sheet of tri-folded paper. The logo at the top read, Harborline Community Credit Union. I took a sip of coffee and began to read. Dear Ms. Pierce, this letter is a formal notice regarding the commercial loan account ending in 4492, associated with the entity Kayla's Glow Studio. Our records indicate that the account is currently 60 days past due. As the listed co-borrower on this obligation, you are jointly and severally liable for the outstanding balance of $35,000. My coffee cup halted halfway to my mouth. I blinked, sure that I had misread the numbers or the names. I read it again. Kayla's Glow Studio. My stepsister's failing business. Co-borrower. Natalie Pierce. The room suddenly felt very cold. The sunlight seemed to drain away, leaving everything in a sharp, gray focus. I had never signed a loan for Kayla. I had never even banked with Harborline Community Credit Union. My accounts were with a major national bank, secured with two-factor authentication and biometric locks. For a few seconds, my brain tried to offer rational explanations. It was a clerical error. It was a phishing attempt sent via snail mail. It was a mix-up with another Natalie Pierce in Cleveland. But deep down, in the pit of my stomach where instinct lives, I knew it was none of those things. I set the coffee down. My hand was trembling, but my mind was already shifting gears. The shock was evaporating, replaced by the cold, hard hum of my professional training. I am a senior security analyst. I hunt anomalies for a living. I track down breaches in corporate fortresses, and right now, the breach was in my own kitchen. I did not call my father. I did not call Elaine. I did not scream. Instead, I walked into my home office and booted up my workstation. I have a 3-monitor setup, powered by a custom rig I built for data processing. I logged into the Harborline Community Credit Union's online portal using the temporary reference number provided in the letter. The page loaded. It asked for a verification of the last 4 digits of my social security number. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. If I typed them in, I was acknowledging the link, but I needed to see the source. I typed the numbers. Access granted. There it was, a dashboard showing a commercial loan taken out 6 months ago. The principal amount was $50,000. $15,000 had been paid. The rest was in default. I navigated to the Documents tab. There was a PDF file labeled Signed Loan Agreement. I downloaded it. When I opened the file, I scrolled immediately to the signature page, and there, at the bottom, next to Kayla's flamboyant, looped signature, was mine. Natalie Pierce. It looked like my signature. It had the same sharp slant on the N, the same quick cross on the To a layman, it was perfect, but I stared at it, zooming in until the pixels blurred. It was too perfect. It was identical to the signature I had used on my driver's license renewal 3 years ago, down to the microscopic jitter at the end of the E. It was a digital lift. Someone had copied my signature from another document and pasted it here. I felt a wave of nausea, but I pushed it down. Nausea does not solve crimes. Data does. I right-clicked on the PDF file and opened the Properties menu. Most people think a PDF is just a digital piece of paper. To an analyst, a PDF is a container full of metadata, breadcrumbs that tell you exactly where the file came from, who created it, and when. I pulled up my metadata extraction tool. The lines of code cascaded down my center monitor. Creation date: October 14th, 2023, 2:15 in the afternoon. Author: Elaine Home PC. Software: Adobe Acrobat Pro. I stared at the screen. October 14th. I pulled up my work calendar from last year. On October 14th, I was in Chicago, finalizing the migration of a server farm for a client. I was 300 miles away from Cleveland. I had receipts for a lunch at a deli in the Loop at exactly 2 o'clock. Then I looked at the IP address stamped on the submission log, which the bank's sloppy security had left embedded in the file header. 192.168.0.1. That was a local gateway, but the external IP address listed in the transfer log was 67.142. I ran a geolocation trace. It pinged back instantly. The signal originated from a residential address in the suburbs of Cleveland. My father's house. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence of the room. It was not a hacker from Russia or a bot from a server farm in the middle of the ocean. The call was coming from inside the house, literally. But how did they get the signature? I started digging through my email archives. I searched for anything sent from Elaine or Kayla in the months leading up to October. I filtered by attachments. And then I found it. An email from Elaine dated September 30th. Subject: Urgent. Property tax. Update for Dad. The body of the email was short and frantic. Natalie, honey, the city is updating the tax codes for the district. Since you are on the deed for your apartment, we need to file this exemption form so you do not get double taxed. I need you to sign the attached authorization so I can drop it off for you. Dad is stressing out about it. Please help. I remembered that day. I was swamped at work. I had glanced at the attachment on my phone. It looked like a standard tax form. I had printed the first page, signed it, scanned it, and emailed it back. I opened the attachment again now, on my large monitor. I analyzed the file structure. The file Elaine had sent me was a multi-page PDF container. The first page was indeed a tax form, but pages 2, 3, and 4 were blank white pages with invisible text fields. When I had signed the document, I had effectively applied my digital signature approval to the entire packet. She had not just asked for a signature, she had sent me a Trojan horse. She had taken my valid signature from that tax form, lifted it using editing software, and pasted it onto the loan application for Kayla's salon. I picked up my phone and dialed Harborline Community Credit Union. I bypassed the automated menu and pressed 0 until I got a human being. Loan department, a tired voice answered. This is Greg. This is Natalie Pierce, I said. My voice was frighteningly steady. I am holding a notice of default for a loan I did not authorize. I am looking at the metadata of the application file, which proves it was created on a computer that does not belong to me, at a time when I was 300 miles away. There was a pause on the line, the sound of typing. Ms. Pierce, Greg said, his tone shifting from bored to guarded. I see the account here. Look, if this is a dispute, you need to come into the branch. I am not coming into the branch, Greg, I said. I am recording this call for legal purposes. I want you to look at the rejection log history for this application. Tell me what happened on October 16th. I cannot give out internal logs, Greg stammered. You can, and you will, I said, because if you do not, I will be filing a subpoena for them along with a formal complaint to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau regarding your bank's failure to verify identity on commercial loans. I can see the file. Greg, I know it was flagged. Tell me why. More typing, slower this time. Okay, Greg said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Look, the system did flag the signature. The algorithm noted a pixelation discrepancy. It was marked as high risk. And yet, I said, the loan was issued. The primary borrower, Mrs. Elaine Pierce, she called in, Greg admitted. She spoke to the branch manager. She said you were traveling for business and had scanned the document from a hotel scanner, which is why the quality was low. She provided your social security number and your previous address. She was very convincing. The manager overrode the flag. She was very convincing, I repeated. The words tasted like bile. Ms. Pierce, the loan was actually technically rejected by the main underwriting system a week later, Greg added hurriedly, trying to cover his tracks. That is why you got the letter. The default notice is actually for the fees associated with the failed origination and the initial disbursement that was recalled. The main principal was frozen, but the account exists in your name. I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the black screen of my phone. The loan had been frozen. That was the good news. But it was a terrifying kind of good news. It meant that they had tried. It meant that Elaine and Kayla had sat together at that computer, manipulated my signature, and committed a federal crime without blinking an eye. And if this one failed, what about the ones that didn't? The thought hit me like a physical blow. If the bank system had not been sensitive enough to catch the pixelation, I would be $50,000 in debt right now. I spun my chair around and looked at my filing cabinet, where I kept the physical copy of my apartment deed and mortgage papers. I pulled the binder out. I needed to see the original contract I had signed for the condo. I flipped through the pages. Everything looked normal until I got to the notices and communications section. There, in the fine print of the contact addendum, was a line I had never noticed before. Secondary authorized contacts for digital correspondence, Elaine Pierce, Kayla Pierce. I checked the date on the addendum. It was dated 3 months after I bought the apartment. I realized then what had happened. They had used the tax form authorization I signed blindly at the dinner table, the one Elaine said was just for insurance, to add themselves as authorized contacts on my mortgage portal. They were intercepting my mail. They were diverting notifications. I stood up and walked into my living room. I looked at the sofa I had saved up for. I looked at the walls I had painted. Suddenly, my sanctuary did not feel like a home. It felt like a carcass, and I was watching the vultures circle it. They were not just using me. They were not just borrowing from me. This was an extraction. They were stripping me for parts. I thought about my father. Just let your mother handle it. Was he in on it? Or was he just another victim? Too medicated and too beaten down to notice that his wife was turning his daughter into a credit line? A normal person would have driven over there right then. A normal person would have kicked down the door, waved the papers in Elaine's face, and screamed until the neighbors called the police. I wanted to do that. Every fiber of my being wanted to drive to that house and burn it down with the truth. But then I looked at the metadata on my screen again. Author, Elaine Ahome, PC. If I confronted them now, Elaine would cry. She would say it was a misunderstanding. She would say she was just trying to help Kayla and thought I wouldn't mind. She would gaslight my father into believing I was overreacting. She would delete the files. She would wipe the computer. She would destroy the evidence before I could make it stick. She would win, because she played the emotional game. And in the emotional game, the person who cares the least always wins. So I had to stop playing her game. I sat back down at my computer. I opened a new encrypted folder on my secure drive. I named it Project Birthday. I was not going to scream. I was not going to cry. I was going to work. I started a spreadsheet. Column A, date. Column B, incident. Column C, evidence link. I began to download everything. I pulled the logs from the bank. I saved the emails with the headers expanded. I went into my phone records and exported the voicemails where Elaine had guilt-tripped me about money, cross-referencing them with the dates of the attempted withdrawals. I became a ghost in my own life, to them. I would still be Natalie, the distant but dutiful daughter. I would answer their calls. I would nod at their complaints. I would let them think the loan rejection was just a bank error that I hadn't noticed. I would let them feel safe, because a system is most vulnerable when it thinks it is safe. I typed the first entry into my case file. Exhibit A, fraudulent loan application, Harborline Credit Union. Status, attempted. Perpetrator, Elaine Pierce. My finger hovered over the enter key. I wasn't just building a defense, I was building a weapon, and I knew exactly when I was going to detonate it. I closed the file, stood up, and walked to the window. The sun was still shining on Lakeview Heights, but the world looked different now. It was sharper, clearer. "Happy birthday to me," I whispered to the empty room. Then I went back to the computer and began to dig deeper. I had a feeling the loan was just the tip of the iceberg, and I was going to map every inch of the ice before I crashed their ship into it. I knew data. I knew how to track a packet loss across a server farm and how to identify a brute force attack on a firewall. But I did not know the law. I knew enough to know I was in trouble, but not enough to know how to get out of it without blowing up my entire life. That was when I thought of Marcus Hale. We had gone to Ohio State together. He was a pre-law student who drank too much espresso and argued about constitutional rights at 2 a.m. I was the computer science major who fixed his laptop whenever he downloaded a virus from a dodgy research site. We had lost touch over the years, the way people do. But I had seen his updates on LinkedIn. He wasn't working for a big corporate firm in a glass tower. He was a senior attorney at Harborline Legal Aid, a nonprofit that specialized in domestic financial abuse and elder law. I sent him a text. "Hey Marcus, long time. I have a situation. It involves metadata, a forged signature, and my stepmother. Can you meet?" He replied in 3 minutes. "Coffee shop on 4th, 1 hour." The coffee shop was one of those places that smelled of roasted beans and old paper. It was quiet, the kind of place where serious conversations happened. Marcus was sitting in a booth at the back, looking exactly the same as I remembered, just with a few more gray hairs and a slightly more expensive suit jacket. He stood up when he saw me. "Natalie, you look like you have not slept in a week." 3 days, I corrected, sliding into the booth. I placed my laptop bag on the table like it contained a bomb. and I think I might be about to lose my apartment." Marcus signaled the waitress for 2 black coffees. He folded his hands on the table. "Talk to me. Start from the beginning, and do not leave out the emotional stuff, because that is usually where the legal stuff hides." I told him everything. I told him about the guilt trips, the money I sent home, the house repairs. I told him about the insurance paperwork Elaine had made me sign. I told him about the letter from the credit union and the loan for Kayla's salon. At first, he listened with a polite, sympathetic nod, the kind you give to a friend who is complaining about a bad roommate. But when I opened my laptop and showed him the spreadsheet, the metadata logs, the IP trace from my father's house, the overlay of the forged signature, his expression changed. He stopped being my friend and started being a lawyer. He pulled the laptop closer, scrolling through the lines of code I had extracted. "This is not a dispute, Natalie," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. "This is not a family argument. This is financial abuse. And looking at this signature lift, this is fraud, identity theft, federal crimes." "They said it was for insurance," I said weakly. "I signed a general authorization." "A general authorization is not a blank check to take out commercial loans in your name," Marcus said sharply. "Did the document specifically state they could incur debt on your behalf?" I do not know. I did not read the fine print on the 3rd page." Marcus sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Okay, that is mistake number 1. But it is a common one. Manipulators rely on trust. They rely on you feeling too guilty to read the contract." He tapped the screen. "But this? Copy-pasting a signature from one document to another? That voids the authorization, even if you signed a power of attorney. They cannot manufacture a signature on a new instrument. That is forgery." "So what do I do?" I asked. "Do I call the police?" Marcus leaned back. "You could, but here is what will happen. The police will show up. Elaine will cry. She will say it was a misunderstanding, that she had verbal permission. Your father will back her up because he is terrified of her. The police will say it is a civil matter and tell you to get a lawyer. And then Elaine will know you are coming for her, and she will destroy every other piece of evidence she has." "So I do nothing?" "No," Marcus said. "We go to war, but we do it quietly. We build a fortress so strong that when they try to breach it again, and they will, they break their own hands." He pulled a yellow legal pad from his briefcase and uncapped a pen. "Step 1, he said, writing as he spoke. "Do not confront them. This is the most important rule. If you scream at her, you give her the narrative. You become the unstable daughter. You need to be the rock. You need to be boring. Continue to visit. Continue to answer calls. Do not mention the loan. Act like you never got the letter." "That is going to be impossible," I muttered. "It is necessary," he insisted. "We need time to lock down your credit. Step 2. We are going to put a fraud alert on all 3 credit bureaus today. Step 3. We are going to draft a formal demand letter to Harborline Credit Union requiring them to certify in writing that the loan was rejected due to signature discrepancies. We need that on official letterhead." He looked up at me. "I am going to help you draft an email to the bank manager. We are going to use legal terminology. We are going to make them scared of a lawsuit so they give us exactly what we need." I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. "And then?" "And then," Marcus said, "we audit your life. I want you to go back 5 years. Every text message, every voicemail, every Facebook post where Elaine claims your money is family money. Save it all. We need to prove a pattern of coercive control. We need to show that this wasn't a one-time mistake, but a systematic attempt to strip you of your assets." He paused, looking at me carefully. "Natalie, I have to ask you something, and you are not going to like it." "What?" "Your father, Robert." I looked away. "What about him? Is he a victim here, or is he an accomplice?" "He is sick," I said defensively. "He has a heart condition. He just wants peace. He does what she says because it is easier." "In the eyes of the law," Marcus said gently, "silence is consent. If his name is on those documents, or if he was in the room when she sent that application from the home computer. He is liable, You need to be prepared for the fact that protecting yourself might mean exposing him. I do not want to hurt him, I whispered. You are not hurting him, Marcus said firmly. They are hurting you, and by standing by and watching, he is letting it happen. Listen to me. Nat, you are not dragging him into this. He has been standing on their side of the line for a long time. You are just finally refusing to cross over to join him. The words hit me hard. He has been standing on their side. I thought about the barbecue. I thought about him looking at his shoes while Elaine lied about the roof money. I thought about him telling me to just sign the insurance papers. Marcus was right. My father wasn't a hostage. He was a collaborator. He had traded my financial safety for his own domestic comfort. Okay, I said, my voice hardening. We do it. Marcus smiled, a grim, determined expression. Good. Once we have the evidence, we file for a protective order. We can legally sever their access to your finances. We can revoke any power of attorney you might have accidentally signed. It will be a clean cut, a surgical strike. No drama, just paper. A clean cut, I repeated. But as I looked out the window of the coffee shop, watching the people of Cleveland walk by, I knew Marcus was wrong about one thing. With Elaine, there was no such thing as a clean cut. She thrived on the mess. She thrived on the drama. If I blocked her legally, she wouldn't just stop. She would escalate. She would attack my reputation. She would weaponize the family against me. Marcus, I said, turning back to him, get the paperwork ready, block the accounts, but do not serve the papers yet. Why not? Because if I send a lawyer to her door, she will spin it. She will tell everyone I'm suing my sick father. She will play the victim. I thought about my upcoming birthday. I thought about the party Elaine was insisting on throwing. I need to catch them in the act. I need witnesses. I need her to show her true face when there is an audience. Marcus raised an eyebrow. What are you planning? I am not sure yet, I said. But if she wants to play games with my life, I think it is time I hosted the game night. Marcus tapped his pen on the pad. Just be careful, Natalie. These cases, they get ugly. When a narcissist loses control, they do not retreat. They explode. Let her explode, I said, feeling a cold resolve settle in my chest. I have fire insurance. I left the coffee shop an hour later with a to-do list that was 3 pages long. I felt lighter, but also sharper. I wasn't just a daughter anymore. I was a plaintiff. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the defendant. The war did not begin with a lawsuit or a scream. It began with a notification. It was a Tuesday evening, 3 days after I had discovered the loan fraud. I was sitting on my living room floor, surrounded by stacks of printed bank statements, cross-referencing IP addresses with a highlighter in my hand. The room was quiet. The only sound the hum of my server cooling fans. Then, my phone lit up. Elaine Pierce tagged you in a post. My stomach tightened. In the modern world, a tag from a family member usually means a bad photo from a holiday dinner or a shared recipe. But coming from Elaine, in the middle of a Cold War, it felt like a target being painted on my back. I opened the app. There was a photo of me from my college graduation. 10 years ago, I looked young, hopeful, wearing my gown, my arm around my father. Elaine was in the frame too, smiling that tight, possessed smile of hers. It looked like a happy memory. The caption told a different story. Looking at old photos and feeling so heartbroken tonight, Elaine had written, "It is hard when you pour your heart, soul, and life savings into raising a child, only to have them turn their back on their roots. We sacrificed so much to make sure Natalie could have her education and her fancy apartment. We even put our own retirement on hold. Now that her father is sick and her sister is struggling, it is devastating to be shut out. I pray that one day she remembers who got her where she is. Family is about giving back, not taking and running. Heartbroken family, first pray for us." I stared at the words. They were masterfully crafted. She did not mention the fraud. She did not mention the stolen signature. She painted a picture of a sacrificial mother and a selfish, ladder-climbing daughter who had abandoned her dying father. The comments were already rolling in. "Oh, Elaine, I am so sorry. You do not deserve this. Kids these days are so entitled. Stay strong." I had no idea Natalie was like that. She seemed so sweet. Money changes people. It was a digital lynch mob. I scrolled down, my heart hammering against my ribs. These were people I knew, neighbors I had waved to for 20 years, my old piano teacher, my father's fishing buddies. They were all there, liking, reacting with sad faces, offering prayers for Elaine's burden. I wanted to type a reply. I wanted to scream. She stole my identity. She tried to put me $50,000 in debt. But I remembered Marcus's rule. Silence. I put the phone down, face down, but the silence in the apartment suddenly felt heavy. It wasn't empty anymore. It was crowded with the invisible judgments of 300 people who thought I was a monster. The next day, the digital war spilled into the physical world. I went to the grocery store near my father's house. A mistake, perhaps, but I needed to maintain the routine. I ran into Mrs. Gable in the produce aisle. She had known me since I was 12. I smiled and started to say hello. Mrs. Gable looked at me, then looked down at her cart. She gave a quick, stiff nod and turned her cart around, marching toward the dairy section without a word. The rejection was sharp and physical. It was a slap in the face without contact. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't save, but recognized as one of the deacons from the family church. "Natalie, I saw your mother's post. I hope you can find it in your heart to soften. The Bible says, 'Honor thy father and mother,' whatever disputes you have over property. Surely they are not worth breaking a family apart. We are praying for your heart to open." I laughed, a dry, bitter sound. They were praying for my heart. Elaine had gotten to the pastor. She had probably sat in his office, weeping into a handkerchief, telling him how I had tricked my senile father into signing over the family assets, how I was hoarding wealth while they starved. She wouldn't have shown him the loan rejection letter. She wouldn't have mentioned the forgery. Then came Kayla's turn. Kayla didn't go for the sad martyr angle. She went for the victim card. That evening, a notification popped up from Instagram. Kayla had posted a photo of herself standing on the sidewalk outside my building. My building, Lakeview Heights. She was looking up at the balconies with a wistful, tragic expression. The caption read, "So hard to walk by the place you thought would be the future home of your business. I thought we had a plan. I thought sisters helped each other. Guess I was wrong to trust that a verbal promise meant anything. Back to square one for the studio. Thanks for the lesson in reality. Betrayed, self-made karma." It was a lie, a complete, total fabrication. I had never promised her space in my apartment for her studio. It was a residential building, for God's sake. It wasn't even zoned for commercial use. But to her followers, to our mutual friends, it looked like I had dangled a carrot and then snatched it away to watch her fall. People believed it because they wanted to believe it. It fit the narrative. The successful, cold corporate sister versus the struggling, artistic younger sister. The pressure began to bleed into my work. On Thursday, I was in the break room at Northline Cyber Defense, pouring coffee. A colleague named Sarah, who I was friendly with on Facebook, walked in. She hesitated when she saw me. "Hey, Nat," she said, her voice a little too high. "How are things? Family okay?" "Fine," I said, stirring my coffee. "Why?" "Oh, nothing," she said, looking at the floor. "Just saw some stuff online. Your stepmom seems really upset. Just wanted to check in." "It is complicated, Sarah," I said, keeping my face neutral. "Right, complicated," she repeated, but her eyes said guilty. She grabbed a water bottle and left the room quickly. I stood there, gripping the hot paper cup until my knuckles turned white. It was suffocating. I felt like I was standing in the middle of a courtroom where the trial had already finished. The verdict had been read, and I hadn't even been served a subpoena. My phone became an instrument of torture. Elaine started leaving voicemails. She was smart enough not to text, perhaps knowing I might screenshot it, but she knew I screened my calls. She wanted her voice to be the last thing I heard. "Beep." Natalie, it is Elaine, her voice cracked, thick with tears. I do not know why you are doing this to us. Kayla is losing her mind. The bank is calling her every day. We just wanted to build something together. Why do you hate us so much? Call me back, please. We can fix this. 2 hours later, beep. You think you are so smart, don't you? Her voice was different now. Cold, hard, the voice she used when no one was watching. You think because you have a fancy job you can look down on us? There is a moral law. Natalie, it is heavier than any paper law. You will pay for this. You will end up alone in that cold apartment, and no one will care. I deleted them. Then I restored them. Then I saved them to the Project Birthday folder. Every accusation was a brick in the wall I was building. But the hardest blow came from my father. He called on Friday night. I picked up, hoping, foolishly, that he had seen the posts and told Elaine to stop. Hi, Dad, I said. Nat, he sounded exhausted. Listen, honey, I need you to just apologize to your mother. I froze. Excuse me? She is spiraling. Natalie, he said. She is posting these things because she is hurt. If you just call her, maybe tell her you will help with Kayla's loan. Or just sign that paper she wanted, just to calm things down. People are talking. Nat, the guys at the lodge are asking me what is going on. Dad, I said, my voice shaking. She forged my signature. She tried to take out $50,000 in my name. That is a felony. And you want me to apologize? She didn't mean it like that, he said. The excuse automatic, practiced over 20 years of marriage. She was just trying to find a solution. She is hot-tempered. You know that. She panics. Do not make this a legal thing. Natalie, do not make us a laughingstock. Just fix it. For me? For me? That was the weapon they always used. My love for him was the hostage they held a gun to. I cannot do that, Dad, I said softly. Then I do not know what to tell you, he said, his voice going cold. You are tearing this family apart. He hung up. I sat on my sofa in the dark. The apartment, my sanctuary, felt like a prison. I looked at the walls I had painted. I looked at the furniture I had bought. Every object felt tainted. The accusations from Facebook, the whispers from the neighbors, the disappointment in my father's voice. They were all invisible paint, coating everything I owned. I felt a sudden, violent urge to end it. Not my life, but the silence. I grabbed my phone. I pulled up Elaine's number. I was going to call her. I was going to scream. I was going to tell her I had the logs. I was going to tell her I knew about the IP address. I was going to unleash a torrent of rage that had been building since I was 12 years old. I wanted to hear her gasp. I wanted to hear her panic. My thumb hovered over the call button. I was shaking. I needed the release. A text message banner slid down from the top of the screen. Marcus, do not engage. I saw the Facebook post. It is bait. She wants you to look unstable. Do not give her a single word she can twist. Let the data speak. I stared at the message. Let the data speak. I lowered the phone. I took a deep breath, holding it until my lungs burned, and then exhaled. Marcus was right. If I called her now, I would just be the hysterical stepdaughter screaming abuse. She would record it. She would play it for the neighbors. See? I told you she was crazy. I needed to be colder. I needed to be smarter. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. I leaned against the counter, looking at the calendar on the fridge. My birthday was next week. Elaine had sent a text earlier that day, buried between the threats and the tears, asking if I was coming home for dinner. We want to celebrate, she had written, despite everything. We want to celebrate you. It was a trap, of course. It was a photo op. She wanted me there so she could take a picture of us smiling, post it on Facebook with the caption, "All forgiven, love wins," and then, while the camera was off, force me to sign the papers to fix the mess she had made. She wanted a stage. She loved the audience. She loved the performance of the happy family. A thought sparked in my mind. It was cold and bright and dangerous. If she wanted a stage, why shouldn't I give her one? She had weaponized Facebook. She had weaponized the neighbors. She had weaponized the truth by twisting it into lies. But I had the actual truth. I had the hard, unyielding, mathematical truth of metadata and bank logs. And truth, like a bomb, only matters if people see the explosion. I looked at the calendar. November 14th, birthday. I wouldn't cancel the party. I wouldn't hide. I would go. I would let her decorate the room. I would let her invite the neighbors who had judged me. I would let her invite the aunt who gossiped about me. I would let her build the perfect set for her little play. And then, I would bring the refreshments. I picked up my phone again. I didn't call Elaine. I called a custom bakery in downtown Cleveland, a place run by an old college friend who owed me a favor for recovering her crashed hard drive last year. "Hey, Jen," I said when she answered. "I need a cake. A big one. Sheet cake." "Sure." "Nat," Jen said. "Birthday?" "Yeah," I said, a slow, icy smile spreading across my face for the first time in days. "But I have a very specific design in mind. Can your printer handle high-resolution documents on fondant?" Yeah." Jen sounded confused. "We usually do photos, but documents?" "Documents," I confirmed. "And I need a QR code in the corner, scannable." "Okay." Jen hesitated. "What is the text?" "I will email you the file," I said. "And Jen, make it sweet. Make the frosting thick and white. I want it to look innocent." "Natalie, what are you doing?" "I am throwing a surprise party," I said. "For my mother." I hung up. The suffocating feeling in my chest was gone, replaced by the hum of adrenaline. The war of whispers was over. The war of evidence was about to begin. They wanted to talk about who owned what. Fine. We would put it on the table, literally. The phone rang at 7 in the evening on Wednesday. It was Elaine. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. I needed to compose my voice, to strip away the edge of the cybersecurity analyst who had been hunting down IP addresses, and replace it with the tired, defeated daughter she wanted to hear. "Hello?" I answered, keeping my voice low and soft. "Natalie, sweetheart," Elaine's voice came through the line, warm and syrupy, as if the screaming voicemails from 2 days ago had never happened. "I was just checking the grocery list for Saturday. I am ordering that prime rib you like, the expensive cut." It was a bribe, a $50 piece of meat to smooth over a $50,000 felony. "That sounds nice, Elaine," I said. "We really want this to be a good night," she continued, her tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Your father has been so down. Nat, he just wants his girls together. Let's put all this silly paperwork business behind us, okay? Just come home, have some cake, and we can talk like civilized people. I am sure we can find a middle ground on the apartment situation." Middle ground. In Elaine's dictionary, middle ground meant I gave her everything and she graciously accepted it. "I am tired of fighting. Elaine," I lied. The words tasted like copper in my mouth, but I forced them out. "I just want things to go back to normal. I do not want the neighbors talking anymore." "Exactly," she exclaimed, triumphant. She thought she had won. She thought the social pressure worked. "Oh, honey, I knew you would see sense. We will have a big party. Everyone is coming. It will be a fresh start." "Okay," I said. "I will be there." I hung up and stared at the phone. My heart rate hadn't even spiked. A week ago, that conversation would have left me shaking with rage. Now, I felt nothing but the cold, calculating focus of a predator watching its prey walk into a trap. She wanted a fresh start? I was going to give her a finale. I turned to my computer. The folder labeled Project Birthday was open. It was time to execute the operational phase. The timeline I had constructed was tight. I had 3 days before the party. Every hour had to be accounted for. First, the legal firewall. I met Marcus early Thursday morning at his office. Harborline Legal Aid was a cramped, busy place, smelling of stale coffee and desperate hope. But Marcus's desk was an island of organized chaos. "You are sure about this?" Marcus asked, holding the draft of the affidavit. "This is the nuclear option," Natalie, once we file this, there is no going back to Sunday dinners. Sunday dinners died the moment she photoshopped my signature, I said. Is the affidavit ready? It is, Marcus said. He slid a document across the desk. Affidavit of unauthorized use of signature and revocation of power of attorney. We are going to notarize this today. It states formally that you never authorized the commercial loan and that any prior authorizations for tax purposes were limited in scope. But here's the kicker. He pulled out a second document, Motion for Temporary Restraining Order on Assets. This, Marcus said, tapping the paper, is what we serve her with. It prevents her or your father from accessing, encumbering, or leveraging any asset that has your name attached to it, pending a fraud investigation. If she tries to take out a credit card in your name after being served this, she goes straight to jail, no pass go, no collect $200. Perfect, I said. But we need to serve it correctly, Marcus warned. If you just hand it to her, she might tear it up and claim she never got it. We need a third-party process server. I have a plan for that, I said, a small, grim smile touching my lips. The party is at 6. Can you have someone there at 6:30? Dress him in a delivery uniform. She will think he is bringing a gift. Marcus looked at me, impressed and slightly terrified. You are turning a birthday party into a sting operation. She loves an audience, I said. I am just making sure the audience gets a show. After the law office, I went to the bakery. Jen's cakes were famous in Cleveland. She made towering, architectural weddings cakes and whimsical birthday creations. When I walked into her shop, the air smelled of vanilla and spun sugar, a scent that usually made me happy, but today just felt like camouflage. Jen was wiping down the counter. She looked up and grinned. The mystery client. I got your email. Natalie, are you serious with this design? Dead serious, I said. I opened my laptop and showed her the high-resolution scan. It was the first page of my apartment deed, clearly showing Natalie Pierce as the sole owner. Superimposed over it was the rejection letter from the bank regarding the fraudulent loan, and in the bottom right corner, a large, crisp QR code. You want me to print a property deed on a sheet cake, Jen said, looking at the screen. And a bank letter? Yes, on edible paper, high contrast. It needs to be legible, I explained. And the QR code needs to work. If someone scans it with their phone, it needs to take them to the link. Where does the link go? Jen asked, her curiosity piquing. To a public Dropbox folder, I said, containing the metadata logs, the audio recordings of her threats, and the side-by-side comparison of the forged signatures. Jen whistled low. Remind me never to cross you. This is diabolical. It is justice, I said. Can you do it? I can do it, Jen said. I will put a nice border of white roses around it. Make it look real pretty until you get close enough to read the fine print. And the text? I asked. Jen nodded and wrote it down on her order pad. Happy birthday to the only legal owner of apartment 17B. Case file. Pierce versus Pierce. Pending. She looked up. That is a lot of text for a cake. Use a steady hand, I said. I am paying extra. Friday was for the hardware. I went to a spy shop in the dodgy part of town, the kind of place that sold hidden safes and bug sweepers. I didn't need their high-end gear. I could build better surveillance tech myself, but I needed something small and disposable. I bought 2 wireless 4K transmitters disguised as USB chargers. They were innocuous. Everyone has a charger plugged in somewhere. I tested them in my apartment. The wide-angle lens captured the entire living room. The audio pickup was sensitive enough to hear a pin drop. I synced them to a private cloud server. I set up a trigger. Motion activation. I sat on my floor, turning the little black cubes over in my hands. This was what it had come to. I was bugging my own father's house. I felt a wave of nausea, a sudden longing for a normal life where birthday parties were just about bad sweaters and awkward small talk. But then I remembered the way Elaine had looked at my apartment, like a butcher eyeing a side of beef. She wouldn't stop. That was the reality. If I didn't end this publicly, she would just find another way. She would guilt my father into signing something else. She would find a different bank with looser security. She would bleed me dry and then blame me for not having enough blood. The cameras went into my purse, wrapped in a soft cloth. Saturday morning, the day of the party. I woke up at 7. I went for a run. I drank a green smoothie. I treated my body like a machine that needed to be optimized for combat. I spent an hour in front of the mirror, practicing my face. I relaxed my jaw. I widened my eyes. I practiced a soft, apologetic smile. "I am sorry, Elaine," I whispered to my reflection. "I have just been so stressed at work." "You are right, Dad. Family is the most important thing." "I brought the cake. I hope you like it." It was terrifying how easy it was to slip back into the role of the submissive daughter. It made me realize how long I had played it for real. For 20 years. I had made myself smaller so Elaine could feel big. I had apologized for my success so Kayla wouldn't feel like a failure. I had swallowed my pride so my father wouldn't have to deal with conflict. No more. At 4 in the afternoon, I put on a soft blue dress, something modest, something that made me look young and non-threatening. I put on my Apple Watch, ensuring the voice recorder shortcut was on the main face. I drove to the bakery. Jen brought out the box. It was heavy. "Do not drop it," Jen said. "The fondant is delicate." I peeked inside. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive art. The white roses were beautiful. The edible print of the deed was sharp and clear. The QR code was perfectly black and white in the corner. And the message. The message was written in elegant, looping dark chocolate script, looking for all the world like a loving birthday wish until you actually read the words. "It is perfect," I said. "Good luck," Jen said. She didn't smile. She looked at me with a mix of awe and concern. "Nat, make sure you have an exit strategy." "I do not need an exit strategy," I said, lifting the box. "I am not the one who's going to need to run." I drove to the house. The familiar streets of the suburbs felt alien. Like a simulation I was driving through. I pulled into the driveway. The balloons were there. The banner was there. Happy birthday. I took a deep breath. I checked my phone one last time. Marcus. "The server is in position. He will knock at 6:30 sharp. The paperwork is in a gift bag." Natalie. "Copy." I got out of the car. I walked up the path to the front door. I could hear voices inside. Laughter. The clink of glasses. I adjusted my grip on the cake box. I put on my mask. The soft smile. The tired eyes. I opened the door. "Happy birthday!" a chorus of voices shouted. Elaine was there, front and center, wearing a sequined top that caught the light. She rushed forward, arms open, aiming for a hug. "Natalie," she cried, "you made it, and you brought a cake. Oh, you shouldn't have." I let her hug me. I let her perfume heavy, floral, cloying, fill my nose. I felt her arms squeeze me, a gesture of possession masquerading as affection. "I wanted to contribute," I said, my voice steady. "I wanted to make sure everything was clear." "Of course, honey," she beamed, pulling back. Come in. Everyone is dying to see you." I walked into the lion's den. I saw my father, looking relieved. I saw Kayla, looking smug. I saw the neighbors, looking curious. I set the cake box down on the side table, keeping the lid closed for now. "I will just put my bag down," I said. I walked over to the bookshelf. While Elaine was distracted greeting another guest, I slipped the first camera out of my purse. I wedged it between a vase and a photo frame, angling it toward the living room center. I walked to the kitchen, pretending to get a glass of water, and plugged the second camera, the charger, into the outlet above the counter. The green light blinked once and then went dark. Recording. The trap was set. I went back to the party. I mingled. I let Aunt Linda tell me I looked tired. I let the neighbor tell me I should visit more. I nodded. I agreed. I played the part of the penitent child returning to the fold. "See?" Elaine whispered to my father loud enough for me to hear. "I told you she just needed some space. She knows where she belongs." I took a sip of my iced tea. She knows where she belongs. They thought I belonged to them. They thought I was an asset in their portfolio. I looked at the clock. 6:15. 15 minutes until the delivery. 15 minutes until the cake was opened. So, Elaine said, clapping her hands and gathering everyone's attention. Before we cut the cake, Natalie and I were talking, and I think we have some exciting news. Natalie has agreed to finally look over those papers we discussed. For the family. She turned to me, her eyes hard and expectant, daring me to contradict her in front of the crowd. I smiled. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Actually, I said, my voice projecting clearly to the hidden microphones, I have something to say about the papers too, but let's do the cake first. It is special. Elaine's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of suspicion, but greed won out. She wanted the photo op. She wanted the image of us cutting the cake together. Wonderful idea, she chirped. Dylan, bring the cake to the main table. As Dylan went to grab the box I had brought, I checked my watch. 6:29. I moved to the center of the room. I made sure I was in the frame of the camera on the bookshelf. I made sure there was a clear line of sight between Elaine and the front door. I was not just a victim anymore. I was the director of this scene. And as Dylan lifted the lid of the cake box, revealing the white roses and the black text, I prepared myself for the curtain to rise. Operation Birthday Cake was live. I pulled my car up to the curb a few houses down from my father's place. It was 4:40 in the afternoon. The sun was beginning to dip, casting long, stretching shadows across the manicured lawns of the neighborhood. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My face was a mask of calm compliance, the dutiful daughter returning to the fold. But beneath the seat, my pulse was hammering a rhythm of pure adrenaline. I checked my bag. The 2 miniature cameras were tucked inside a side pocket, wrapped in microfiber cloth. The timeline was set. The stage was waiting. I walked up the driveway. The front door was unlocked, as it always was on party days. I stepped inside, and the smell hit me first. Roast beef, heavy perfume, and the faint, stale odor of old potpourri that Elaine loved. "Hello?" I called out, keeping my voice light. "I am early. I thought I could help set up." Elaine appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a floral apron that looked less like cooking attire and more like a costume for a play about a happy housewife. Her eyes narrowed for a fraction of a second, scanning me for weapons or attitude, before she plastered on a wide, bright smile. "Natalie, look at you," she cooed, coming forward but stopping just short of a hug, perhaps remembering the tension of our last phone call. "You are early, that is, helpful, for a change." I wanted to make sure everything was perfect for Dad, I said. "Well, grab a tray," she commanded, pivoting back toward the kitchen. "Kayla is useless today. She is too depressed about the business to lift a finger." I followed her, but I moved slowly. As I passed the living room bookshelf, I paused. Elaine was already shouting orders at Dylan in the backyard. The room was empty for 10 seconds. I reached into my bag. With a practiced sleight of hand I had rehearsed in my apartment for hours, I slid the first camera onto the shelf. It nestled perfectly between a stack of Reader's Digest and a decorative ceramic owl. I adjusted the angle slightly so the lens pointed directly at the coffee table and the sofa, the center stage. I tapped the activation button. A tiny blue light blinked once, then vanished. Camera 1, live. I walked into the kitchen. Elaine was aggressively arranging deviled eggs on a platter. "Here," I said, setting my bag down on the counter near the window curtains. "Let me help with the napkins." While she turned to check the oven, I slipped the second camera, the one disguised as a USB charger, into the wall outlet, just below the curtain line. It had a perfect view of the dining table and the kitchen island. Camera 2, live. Elaine said, her back to me, her voice booming as if addressing a crowd even though it was just us. "We are putting the past behind us today, right, Natalie? A fresh start. I have been telling everyone how excited you are to finally be part of the family decisions again." I folded a napkin with precise, sharp creases. I am looking forward to clarity. Elaine, that is for sure. She turned around, wiping sweat from her forehead. Her eyes bored into me, possessive and calculating. She wasn't looking at a daughter. She was looking at a walking, talking bank account that she had almost lost control of. Good, she said. Because your father needs to know he can rely on you. He is fragile. Natalie, do not ruin tonight. By 5:30, the house was filling up. The air grew thick with body heat and the murmur of conversation. I navigated the room like a ghost, smiling, nodding, accepting drinks I didn't drink. Aunt Linda cornered me near the fireplace. She was holding a glass of white wine and smelling of hairspray. She leaned in close, her breath hot against my ear. You look thin, she observed, her eyes raking over my dress. Then she lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Listen, honey, I know you and Elaine have your differences, but she is doing everything for your dad. You really should just sign whatever she asks. You can't take money to the grave, you know. It is family property. I looked at her. I wondered if Elaine had given her a script, or if this was just natural instinct. You are right, Aunt Linda, I said, smiling a smile that didn't reach my eyes. The truth always comes out eventually, and you definitely can't take lies to the grave either. She blinked, confused by my tone, but I had already moved away. I found my father near the drinks cart. He was pouring himself a scotch. His hand was trembling so badly the bottleneck chattered against the glass rim. He looked gray. Dad, I said softly. He jumped, spilling a few drops. Nat, you look nice. How are you feeling? He wouldn't look at me. He looked at the floor, at the wall, at the bustling guests. I am fine. Just, nerves. Big crowd. Dad, I said, keeping my voice low, you know you do not have to do this. You do not have to go along with her. He took a large gulp of the scotch. She just wants security. Nat, it is just paper. Why is it always such a fight with you? Why can't you just let her handle the details? She understands the tax laws. He didn't believe it. I could hear the hollowness in his voice. He was a man who had traded his spine for a quiet life. We will see, I said. Just before dinner was served, Elaine appeared at my elbow. Her grip on my arm was iron hard. Kitchen, she hissed. Now. She dragged me away from the guests, into the corner of the kitchen near the pantry. It was the only spot she thought was private. She didn't know the USB charger in the outlet 3 feet away was capturing every pixel of her face. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a blue folder. I didn't want to make a scene out there, she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. But since everyone is here, and your father is in a good mood, we need to get this done. It is just a small update to the deed. Just a formality so we can leverage the equity if Dad needs emergency surgery. You know how expensive heart surgery is. She thrust the folder at me. Sign it, she said. Do it now, so we can announce it at dinner. It will make your father so happy. I took the folder. I didn't open it immediately. I stepped back, moving deliberately into the center of the camera's frame. I opened the cover. The document wasn't a medical authorization. The title at the top of the page, in bold, black letters, read, Agreement of Joint Ownership and Co-Mortgage Authorization. Property 17B. I held the paper up, tilting it slightly so the camera lens could catch the header. This says co-mortgage. Elaine, I said calmly. This lets you take out loans against my apartment. It is for your father, she snapped, her face flushing red. Stop being so selfish. Do you want him to die because you were too stingy to share your equity? Just sign the damn paper, Natalie, or do not blame me when everyone out there knows you let your father suffer. I looked at the pen she was holding out. Then I looked at the folder. I will read it over dinner, I said. Sign it now. I said I will read it, I repeated, my voice hard. I am not signing anything without reading it. Elaine, not again. I took the folder and walked out of the kitchen. I went to the dining table, which was now set with Elaine's best china. I placed the folder prominently on the table, right next to my plate. its menacing title facing down, but its presence undeniable. We sat down to eat. The roast beef was dry. The conversation was drier. Elaine sat at the head of the table, holding court. She was in her element, the grieving mother, the saintly wife. "It has been such a hard year," she said, spooning potatoes onto her plate and looking mournfully at Kayla. "Poor Kayla has had such bad luck. The economy is terrible for small businesses. Her spa, well, it is just tragic." Kayla, sitting across from me, looked down at her plate, playing the victim perfectly. "I tried my best," she murmured. "But the banks, they are sharks. They won't lend to you unless you have collateral." Elaine nodded, her eyes darting to me. "Exactly. Unless you have assets. It is a shame when family who have assets won't step up to help. If Kayla had just a little backing, maybe a co-signer with property, she wouldn't be facing bankruptcy right now." The table went silent. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Every eye turned to me. The implication was clear. I was the reason Kayla was failing. I was the rich sister hoarding the gold while the family starved. I felt the weight of their judgment. The neighbors were shaking their heads. Aunt Linda was clicking her tongue. "Well," I said, slicing my meat with surgical precision, "it is risky to mix family and finance. You never know when a signature might end up in the wrong place." Elaine's eyes flashed with danger. She didn't like me speaking. She didn't like the tone. "We are all family here, Natalie," she said sharply. "We share burdens. At least, some of us do." She looked pointedly at the blue folder next to my plate. "So, have you read it yet? Are you going to give your father a birthday present? Or are you going to keep him worrying?" The pressure was immense. It was a physical weight in the room. This was her strategy. Shame me into submission in front of an audience. I took a sip of water. I looked at the camera on the bookshelf. I looked at the camera in the kitchen. "I am thinking about it," I said. Just then, the doorbell rang. The sound shattered the tension like a hammer hitting glass. Elaine frowned. "Who is that? Everyone is here." "I will get it," Dylan said, pushing back his chair. "No, sit," Elaine commanded. She stood up, smoothing her dress. "It is probably the florist. They missed the delivery earlier. Honestly, you cannot get good help these days." She marched to the front door. The dining room was silent, everyone straining to hear. I turned in my chair. Through the archway, I could see the front hall. A young man in a generic brown delivery uniform was standing there. He was holding a square box and a clipboard. It was Kevin, a paralegal from Marcus's office, a guy who usually wore band t-shirts but cleaned up nicely for a role. "Delivery for Elaine Pierce," Kevin said, his voice carrying clearly into the dining room. "Oh!" Elaine's voice went up an octave. She turned back to glance at us, beaming. "See? I told you. Probably a gift from the Johnsons." She turned back to Kevin. "I am Elaine." "I have a package and a document for you to sign," Kevin said professionally. "Just acknowledging receipt." "Of course," Elaine said. She grabbed the pen from his clipboard. She signed her name with a flourish. Big, loopy, confident. She had just signed the proof of service. She had just legally acknowledged that she had been served. Kevin handed her the copy of the signature page and the box. "Have a nice evening, ma'am." He walked away. Elaine walked back into the dining room, carrying the box. It was small, white, and unassuming. She looked puzzled. "It is from the court?" she muttered, squinting at the return address label on the envelope attached to the box. "Open it later." "Mom," Kayla said, "let's do the cake. Natalie brought a cake." Elaine's greed for the spotlight overrode her confusion. She tossed the envelope onto the sideboard, unopened. "You are right. Let's do the cake. We need something sweet to wash down this tension." She looked at me, a challenge in her eyes. "Go get it, Natalie. Bring it out. Let's see what you bought for us." I stood up. My legs felt steady. My hands were not shaking. I walked to the side table and picked up the heavy white box. I carried it to the center of the dining table. I moved the candles aside. I moved the wine glasses. I placed the box squarely in the middle of the family she had weaponized against me. "I think you will find," I said, my voice cutting through the room, "that this cake speaks for itself." I lifted the lid. A collective gasp went around the table, but it wasn't a gasp of delight. It was a gasp of confusion. They were expecting balloons. They were expecting happy birthday, Mom and Dad. They were expecting flowers. Instead, they were looking at a stark, high-contrast edible image of a legal document. The black text stood out violently against the white frosting. The seal of the bank was visible. The QR code in the corner looked like a digital scar. And right in the center, written in beautiful, mocking calligraphy, were the words that would end the charade forever. Elaine leaned in, her smile faltering. What is this?" "Read it," I said softly. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the whir of the hard drives in my mind. Saving every second of this footage to the cloud, someone dimmed the lights. The room plunged into a soft, flickering twilight, illuminated only by the 32 candles dancing on top of the cake. The flames cast long, jumping shadows against the walls, twisting the faces of my family into strange, distorted masks. Elaine moved behind me. I could feel the heat of her body, the heavy, cloying scent of her perfume wrapping around me like a chokehold. She placed her hands on my shoulders. It was meant to look affectionate, the loving stepmother guiding her daughter, but her grip was tight. Her fingers dug into my collarbone, a subtle physical warning to behave, to play the part, to let the script run its course. "Make a wish, Natalie," Elaine announced, her voice booming in the semi-darkness. She squeezed my shoulders harder. "Wish for us all to be a family again. Wish for the past to stay in the past." The guests murmured their agreement. "Go on, Nat," someone whispered. I stared at the candles. The fire looked clean. It looked purifying. I closed my eyes. In the darkness behind my eyelids, I did not wish for peace. I did not wish for reconciliation. I wished for the one thing Elaine had spent 20 years burying under layers of guilt and manipulation. I wish for the truth to be indelible. I thought, I wish for the ink to dry and never fade. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of burning wax and impending justice, and I blew. The smoke curled up in thin gray ribbons. The room went black for a second before Dylan flipped the switch. The overhead lights flooded the dining room with a harsh, clinical brightness, washing out the soft intimacy of the candlelight. Everyone blinked, adjusting to the glare. "Yay!" Kayla cheered weakly, clapping her hands. But the applause died almost instantly. Because now, with the lights on, the cake was fully visible. I stepped back, slipping out of Elaine's grasp. I watched as my cousin Mike, who was standing closest to the table, leaned in. He squinted, his brow furrowed. He tilted his head, looking from the cake to me, and then back to the cake. "What is that?" Mike asked. He wasn't asking to be rude. He was genuinely confused. Elaine laughed, a high, nervous titter. "It is just a joke. You know Natalie and her dry sense of humor. Probably some inside joke from work." She reached for the cake knife. "Let's cut it before the frosting melts." "Wait," Mike said. He put a hand out to stop her. He read the inscription aloud, his voice clear and carrying to every corner of the silent room. "Happy birthday to the only legal owner of apartment 17B. Case file. Pierce versus Pierce. Pending." The silence that followed was not the silence of peace. It was the vacuum before a thunderclap. "What does that mean?" Aunt Linda asked from the back of the room. "Pierce versus Pierce? Like a lawsuit?" "It is nothing," Elaine shrilled. She tried to slice into the cake, aiming the knife right at the word pending, desperate to destroy the evidence. "It is just a silly decoration. The bakery must have messed up the order." "That is not a mistake," I said. My voice was calm, but it cut through her panic like a razor. "And the QR code works. Leo, why don't you check it?" I pointed to my 12-year-old nephew, Leo, who was already holding his smartphone, his thumb hovering over the camera app. He was the wild card I had counted on. Kids are faster with technology than adults are with lies. "Leo, put that away," Elaine snapped. But it was too late. Leo had already scanned the black square in the corner of the cake. "Whoa," Leo said, his eyes widening. "It is opening a folder. There are a lot of files here." "Put it on the screen, Leo," I said. "Natalie, stop this," my father shouted. He looked terrified. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is a party. Why are you doing this?" "Because you wouldn't listen to me when I spoke, Dad," I said. "So now you are going to listen to the data." I pulled my phone from my pocket. I had already paired it with the living room's smart TV earlier that afternoon when I pretended to help with the setup. With a single tap, I overrode the screensaver of family photos. The 60-inch screen on the wall flickered. The room turned to look at it. The image that filled the screen was a high-definition scan of the loan application from Harborline Community Credit Union. "What is that?" someone whispered. "That," I said, pointing to the screen, "is a commercial loan application for $50,000 for Kayla's Glow Studio, dated October 14th. I swiped the screen on my phone. The image on the TV changed. It zoomed in on the signature line. "And that," I continued, "is my signature, or rather, a digital copy of my signature that was lifted from a tax document I signed for Elaine 3 weeks prior." "You are lying!" Kayla screamed. She jumped up, her face pale. "You signed that. You said you would help me." "Did I?" I asked. "Then why does the metadata show this file was created on the home computer in this house while I was physically located in Chicago?" I tapped my phone again. A new file opened on the TV. It was a video log from the bank's security server, something Marcus had subpoenaed the thread of, which made the bank manager very cooperative in handing over the transaction history. "This is the rejection letter," I narrated. "Rejected for," and I quote, "suspicion of forgery." Elaine was shaking. Her hands were gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white. She looked like a trapped animal. She looked around the room, searching for an exit, searching for an ally. "She is making this up," Elaine yelled. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "She is a computer genius. She faked all of this. She is trying to frame me because she hates that I married her father. She has always been jealous. She is sick." The guest looked unsure. Elaine was a good actress. She was crying now. Big, crocodile tears that spilled onto her cheeks. I have loved her like my own. And this is how she repays me? With forgeries? With lies? "Lies?" I asked. I looked at the camera hidden on the bookshelf. I looked at the camera hidden in the charger. "Let's hear about the lies," I said. I pressed play on the audio file I had queued up. The speakers on the TV crackled for a second. Then, Elaine's voice filled the room. It wasn't the sweet, tearful voice she was using now. It was the voice from the voicemail she had left me 2 days ago, the one she thought I had deleted. "Kayla just needs to use your apartment as collateral for a few months. God, you are so selfish. If the daughter won't help, then who will? We just need to get the name on the deed. Once your name is on the loan, you can't back out. We will just tell your father it is for his medical bills. He will sign anything I put in front of him." The recording ended. The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. My father slowly turned his head to look at Elaine. His mouth was slightly open. "Elaine," he whispered, You said the paperwork was for my heart medicine." Elaine's face went through a terrifying transformation. The tears stopped instantly. The mask of the grieving mother fell away, revealing the raw, ugly rage underneath. She had been exposed. Her narrative had been stripped away, layer by layer, until only her greed remained. She didn't look at my father. She looked at me. "You little bitch," she hissed. It happened fast, but to me, it felt like slow motion. Elaine lunged across the corner of the table. She didn't care about the guests. She didn't care about the party. She only wanted to hurt the person who had taken away her power. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my flesh, and yanked me forward. With her other hand, She swung. Smack. The slap echoed through the room, louder than the first one, sharper. It stung my cheek, snapping my head to the side. "Mom!" Kayla screamed. Elaine stood there, chest heaving, her eyes wild. "You ruin everything, you ungrateful, miserable parasite. I should have thrown you out the day your father brought you home." I stood my ground. I didn't hold my cheek this time. I didn't flinch. I let the red mark bloom on my skin. I looked straight into the lens of the camera on the bookshelf. Then I turned my gaze back to her. "That is it," I said. My voice was low, but in the dead silence of the room, it sounded like a gavel banging down. "That is the last time you will ever hit me without consequences." As if on cue, the front door opened. We hadn't locked it after the delivery guy left. Elaine spun around, ready to scream at whoever was intruding on her breakdown. But it wasn't just the delivery guy. Kevin was back, but this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood 2 uniformed officers from the Lakeview Heights Police Department. Marcus had called them 10 minutes ago, alerting them to a domestic disturbance in progress. A disturbance he knew was inevitable, because he knew Elaine. The room parted like the Red Sea. The guests backed away from Elaine, leaving her isolated by the table, standing next to the cake that had convicted her. "Elaine Pierce?" one of the officers asked. He was a tall man with a calm, bored expression. He had seen plenty of family fights, but he probably hadn't seen one with a PowerPoint presentation before. She attacked me," Elaine stammered, pointing at me. "She is crazy. Get her out of my house." "Ma'am," the officer said, stepping forward. "We received a call regarding a domestic assault, and based on what we just walked in on, and the statements from the witness who called it in." He looked at Kevin. Kevin stepped forward. He wasn't holding a cake box this time. He was holding a thick manila envelope. "Mrs. Pierce," Kevin said, his voice devoid of the fake cheerfulness he had used earlier, "I am serving you with a temporary restraining order regarding the assets of Natalie Pierce. Additionally, this is a formal notice of investigation regarding identity theft, wire fraud, and bank fraud." He held the papers out. Elaine didn't take them. She backed away, knocking into the table. The cake wobbled. "No," she whispered. "No, Robert, tell them. Tell them it is a mistake." She turned to my father. She reached out for him, her hands trembling. My father looked at her. He looked at the papers in the officer's hand. He looked at the TV screen, where the evidence of her betrayal was still frozen. And then he looked at me, at the red mark on my face, at the calm, resolute way I was standing. For the first time in 20 years, Robert Pierce did not step forward to save her. He took a step back. "Robert?" Elaine gasped. "You used me," my father said. His voice was shaking, but the words were clear. "You said it was for my heart. You said we were a team." "I did it for us," Elaine screamed. "I did it for this family." "No," I said. "You did it for you." The officer stepped closer. "Ma'am, I am going to need you to step outside with us so we can take a statement, and I am going to need to see some identification." "I am not going anywhere," Elaine shrieked. She looked at the guests. She looked at Aunt Linda. "Linda, help me. Tell them." Aunt Linda looked down at her wine glass. She turned her back. Elaine looked at the neighbors. They were all studying the floor or their phones. The herd had turned, the social armor she had built. The reputation of the saintly stepmother had been shattered by a QR code and a slap. Elaine Pierce was alone. I watched as the realization hit her. It wasn't regret. It was the terrifying, hollow panic of a narcissist who has lost her audience. "This isn't over," she spat at me as the officer firmly guided her by the elbow toward the door. "You think you won? You have no one. Natalie, you are all alone." I looked at Marcus's paralegal, who gave me a nod. I looked at the police doing their job. I looked at the digital evidence that protected my future. "I am not alone, Elaine," I said, loud enough for her to hear before they dragged her out. "I have the truth, and it turns out The truth is a hell of a lot stronger than you." The front door closed behind them. The room was left in a stunned, ringing silence. I looked down at the cake. The word pending had been smeared by the knife Elaine had tried to use, but the rest of the message was still crisp and clear. "Happy birthday to the only legal owner." I picked up the knife. My hand was steady. I cut a perfect square slice, right through the edible deed. "Does anyone want cake?" I asked. "It is vanilla bean. I paid for it myself." The silence in the room was broken by the crackle of a police radio. "Ma'am?" I turned my head slowly. The officer who had separated me from Elaine was standing close, his body angled to block her from reaching me again. He was looking at the red welt that was rapidly rising on my cheek. He was young, maybe 5 years younger than me, but his eyes were hard and professional. "Do you need medical attention?" he asked. "We can call an ambulance." "I am fine," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow, but steady. It was the voice of someone who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in the shower, imagining every variable. "Do you want to file a formal complaint regarding the assault?" he continued, his pen hovering over his notepad. From the corner of the room, my father let out a sound that was half groan, half sob. No, she doesn't. Officer, please. It is just a family argument. Emotions are high. It is a birthday party, for God's sake." He looked at me, his eyes pleading, desperate, terrified. "Natalie, tell him you do not want to make a scene. Your mother is she is just stressed." I looked at my father. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. I looked at the way he was wringing his hands, trying to smooth over a felony with the same pathetic eagerness he used to smooth over Elaine's insults for 20 years. He wasn't worried about my safety. He was worried about the neighbors seeing a squad car in his driveway. He was worried about the shame. I turned back to the officer. "I want to file a report," I said clearly. "I want to press charges for assault, and I want to ensure that the footage from tonight is entered into evidence." "Footage?" the officer asked. I pointed to the bookshelf where the ceramic owl sat. Then I pointed to the USB charger in the kitchen wall. "There are 2 cameras recording this room, plus the audio from my watch. You will have a clear view of the unprovoked attack." You recorded us?" my father gasped. He stepped toward me, his face twisting into a mix of betrayal and disbelief. "You set this up? You brought police into my house? On purpose?" "I brought the truth into your house, Dad," I said. "The police invited themselves when your wife decided to hit me." "How could you?" he hissed, lowering his voice so the officers wouldn't hear, though they were watching him like hawks. "Do you have any idea what this does to our reputation? To me? You are airing our dirty laundry in front of the whole street. You are destroying this family." "The family was destroyed the moment you let her forge my signature, Dad," I replied. I reached into my bag. The movement made the officer flinch slightly, but I moved slowly and pulled out the thick envelope Marcus had prepared. "And just so we are clear," I said, handing a copy to the officer and holding another copy up for my father to see. "This is a temporary restraining order granted by the Cuyahoga County Court this afternoon. It freezes any and all assets connected to my name. It revokes any power of attorney, implied or written." I walked a step closer to my father. He shrank back, as if the paper was a loaded gun. "That means no one in this house can sign my name," I said, my voice cutting through the murmurs of the stunned guests. "No one can leverage my apartment. No one can talk to my bank. From this second forward, if either of you tries to file a single piece of paper regarding apartment 17B, you will be arrested for violating a court order. Everything goes through my lawyer." My father stared at the document. He looked like a man watching his house burn down, too paralyzed to pick up a hose. You can't do this," he whispered. "We are your parents." "You are my dependents," I corrected him cold. "Or you were, not anymore." Behind him, the room was shifting. The guests were no longer just an audience. They were a jury, and the verdict was turning. Elaine was still arguing with the other officer near the door. her voice shrill and frantic. "She is lying. She is mentally unstable. Ask anyone. Ask my daughter." She gestured wildly toward Kayla. "Kayla, tell them. Tell them how she has been harassing us." Kayla didn't answer. She was standing frozen near the television. The screen was still displaying the contents of the Dropbox folder I had cast to it. While the chaos unfolded, the slideshow had auto-advanced to the next file. It was an email chain between Elaine and a loan officer at a predatory lending firm, one of those places that charge 300% interest. The subject line read, "Collateral Swap Strategy." Kayla was reading it. I watched her eyes move across the giant screen. From Elaine Pierce. To Quick Cash Partners. Message: My stepdaughter is difficult, but she is soft. If we transfer the primary liability of the salon loan to her property, she won't fight it in court. She is too afraid of upsetting her father. Just send the papers. I will handle the signatures. Kayla does not need to know the interest rate is adjustable. She just needs the cash to keep the doors open. Kayla's face went the color of ash. She had thought her mother was fighting for her. She had thought Elaine was the lioness protecting her cub. Now, seeing the words in black and white, Kayla does not need to know. She realized she was just another piece on the board. Elaine wasn't trying to save Kayla's business. She was trying to trap Kayla in a debt cycle she could never escape, using my house as the bait. "Mom," Kayla whispered. Her voice was small, broken. Elaine stopped shouting at the officer. She spun around. She saw the TV. "Kayla, honey, do not read that," Elaine said, her voice dropping to a desperate purr. That is out of context. That is just legal talk." "You said the interest rate was fixed," Kayla said, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. "You told me it was 3%. This email says adjustable, starting at 12%. "I was handling it," Elaine snapped, losing patience. "I was taking care of you. Why do you have to question everything?" "You were going to bankrupt me," Kayla said. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She looked at me. For the first time in her life, she didn't look at me with envy or disdain. She looked at me with horror. She was going to put it all on you, and when the rate hiked, she was going to let the bank take your house to pay my debt. And then she would have blamed you for losing the family asset, I added quietly. "Shut up," Elaine shrieked. She lunged toward the TV, as if she could physically claw the words off the screen. The police officer grabbed her arm, restraining her. "Get off me," she screamed. "This is my house. That is my TV." "Mom, stop," Dylan said. Everyone turned. Dylan was standing by the kitchen door. He was the quiet one, the one who kept his head down, played his video games, and tried to ignore the toxicity. He was holding a beer, but he wasn't drinking it. "You told me she agreed," Dylan said. His voice was deep, steady, and devastatingly disappointed. "Last week, when I asked why Natalie wasn't coming over for dinner, you said, 'Natalie agreed to sign the house over. She is just embarrassed to face us.' You told me everything was unified." "It was," Elaine insisted, sweating now. "In principle. She knows it is the right thing to do." "She didn't know anything." "Mom," Dylan said. He looked at the cake. "She had to print a lawsuit on a birthday cake just to get you to listen. That does not look like unity to me." The social fabric of the room finally ripped wide open. Aunt Linda, Elaine's older sister, the woman who had judged me for my selfishness just 20 minutes ago, stepped forward. She was a hard woman, a woman who valued money and reputation above all else. She walked up to Elaine, who was now handcuffed, her hands secured behind her back by the officer. "Elaine," Aunt Linda said. Her voice was ice. "You told me Natalie borrowed $20,000 from you for college. You told me that is why you were broke last Christmas." Elaine's eyes darted around. "She did. It cost a fortune to raise her. I put myself through college on scholarships and 2 jobs. Aunt Linda," I said from across the room, "I have the tax returns to prove it. In fact, I sent Elaine $5,000 that Christmas to pay for the furnace." Aunt Linda looked at me. She scrutinized my face, my cheap dress, my defiant stance. Then she looked at her sister, decked out in sequins, handcuffed in her own living room. "You took money from the girl?" Aunt Linda asked Elaine. "And you lied to the family? You made us treat her like a pariah because you were greedy?" "I did it for us," Elaine sobbed, crumbling now. "I did it so we wouldn't look poor. You do not understand the pressure." "I understand theft," Aunt Linda said. She turned to the police officer. "Get her out of here. I cannot look at her." My father tried one last, desperate attempt to regain control. He stepped toward the officer holding Elaine. "Officer, wait. We can work this out. My cousin here." He gestured to a man in a gray suit standing near the window. "He is a real estate agent. He can explain that these are just misunderstandings about property value." The cousin, Uncle Ben, technically my father's second cousin, looked at my father like he was radioactive. "Do not bring me into this, Bob," Ben said, backing away. "But you signed," my father pleaded. "You signed as a witness on the preliminary papers." Ben froze. He looked at the police officer, who was now looking at him with interest. He looked at the legal warning I was holding. "I signed a blank page," Ben said quickly, his voice rising in panic. "Elaine told me it was a character reference for a club membership. I didn't read the header. If she attached that signature page to a mortgage document, that is on her. I am not going down for fraud. Bob, you are on your own." You signed a blank page?" my father stammered. "You signed 3 of them, Dad," I said. My father went pale. He slumped against the wall, sliding down until he hit the floor. He looked small. He looked broken. He looked like a man who had spent his life building a castle on a swamp and was shocked that it was sinking. "Okay, that is enough," the officer said. "Mrs. Pierce, you are coming with us. We will take your statement at the station." They began to march Elaine toward the front door. She struggled, her heels scraping against the hardwood floor, the floor I had paid to have refinished 3 years ago. The room was deadly silent. The party guests, the neighbors, the family. They parted to let the police through. No one offered a word of support. No one offered to call a lawyer. They just watched, their faces a mixture of morbid curiosity and disgust. They were witnessing the death of a reputation, and in the suburbs, that is more final than a funeral. At the door, Elaine stopped. She dug her heels into the mat. She twisted her head around to look at me one last time. Her mascara was running. Her hair was wild. But her eyes were still burning with that same toxic fire. "You will hanker after this," she screamed. "You will be sorry. You think you are winning? You are losing everything. You have no family left. No one is on your side." The words echoed in the hallway. "No one is on your side." It was the threat she had used since I was 12. "Be nice, or you will be alone. Give me what I want, or I will turn them against you." I looked at her. I looked at my father, huddled on the floor. I looked at Kayla, crying quietly by the TV. I looked at Dylan, staring at his beer. I felt a strange, cold peace settle over me. I never had anyone on my side. "Elaine," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried to her clearly. "I was alone in this house when you were here. I was alone when I moved out. I was alone when I built my life, and I am still standing." "I hope you rot in that apartment," she shrieked as the officer shoved her through the door. "I hope you die alone." The door slammed shut. The sound was final. The house fell silent. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the silence of a battlefield after the artillery has stopped. The air smelled of burnt wax from the candles and the sharp tang of fear. I stood there, clutching my purse. I looked around the room. I saw the photos on the mantelpiece, smiling. Happy photos of a family that never existed. I saw the armchair where my father sat every night, ignoring the way Elaine spoke to me. I saw the dining table where I had been manipulated, coerced, and finally, assaulted. It didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a crime scene. It looked like the wreckage of a 20-year con. I looked at the table. The cake was still there. The slice I had cut was sitting on a plate, untouched. The QR code was still visible, a digital portal to the ugly truth. My father was still on the floor. He had his head in his hands. He was weeping. Soft, pathetic sounds. "Nat," he choked out. "Nat, please." He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just pleaded, begging for the status quo to return, begging for me to fix the unfixable. I looked at him and I felt nothing. The guilt was gone. The obligation was gone. The fear was gone. I turned to the officer who was still in the room, taking notes. "I am ready to give my statement now," I said, "and then I would like a copy of the incident report for my insurance." I walked past my father without looking down. I walked past Kayla without saying a word. I walked past the aunt who had scorned me. I was the only legal owner of apartment 17B, and for the first time in my life, I realized that owning my own space meant more than just having a deed. It meant owning my own reality, and I was never going to let anyone squat in my head again. The front door clicked shut, sealing the chaos of the police cruisers outside away from the sudden, deafening silence of the living room. It was over. The flashing blue and red lights that had danced across the ceiling like a disco ball from hell faded as the cars pulled away, taking Elaine and her screaming accusations with them. The house felt cavernous. The air was still thick with the scent of burnt candle wax and the lingering, metallic smell of fear. But the energy had shifted. The party guests, who just an hour ago had been sipping wine and judging my life choices, were now moving with the hurried, quiet efficiency of people fleeing a disaster site. No one looked at me directly. There were no more whispers about the ungrateful daughter. There were no more lectures about family duty. Instead, there was a collective, heavy shame that hung over their heads like a fog. Aunt Linda was the first to leave. She picked up her purse from the sofa, her hands trembling slightly. She walked past me, stopping for a fraction of a second. She opened her mouth as if to speak, perhaps to apologize for 20 years of believing Elaine's lies. But she closed it again. She just gave me a sharp, jerky nod, a silent concession of defeat, and walked out the door. Uncle Ben followed, muttering something about needing to call his own lawyer, terrified that his signature on those blank pages would come back to haunt him. The neighbors shuffled out in pairs, keeping their eyes on their shoes, guilty witnesses to a crime they had helped enable with their silence. Within 5 minutes, the house was empty. It was just me, my father, Dylan, and Kayla. My father, Robert, had not moved from the dining room. He had collapsed into the armchair in the corner, the one he always sat in to watch the news while Elaine berated me in the kitchen. He was sitting with his head in his hands, his elbows resting on his knees, his body folded in on itself like a collapsing star. "I did not think," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I did not think it would go this far." I stood across the room from him, in the past. This was the moment I would have rushed to his side. I would have kneeled. I would have rubbed his back. I would have told him it was okay, that we could fix it, that I would absorb the pain so he didn't have to. I would have been the sponge for his discomfort. But tonight, my feet were planted firmly on the hardwood floor. My hands remained at my sides. "You did not think," I repeated, my voice calm and devoid of the soothing tone I had used for decades. "But I have had to think for everyone in this house for 20 years. I have had to think about how to pay bills that weren't mine. I have had to think about how to protect my credit score from my own family. I have had to think about how to survive in a home where I was treated like an ATM." He looked up at me. His eyes were red, rimmed with the exhaustion of a man who had spent a lifetime avoiding reality. "Natalie," he pleaded, "she is your mother, sort of. She is my wife." "She is a criminal, Dad," I said, "and she is an abuser, and you let her do it because it was easier than fighting her." "I have a heart condition," he whimpered, clutching his chest theatrically. It was the trump card he always played. "The stress. If she goes to jail, Natalie. The shame, the house. Who will take care of me? Please, do not let them file the charges. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. For me." He was asking me to lie to the police. He was asking me to obstruct justice. He was asking me to set myself on fire one last time to keep him warm. I am stopping tonight. Dad, I said. I am not doing it anymore. I am protecting my part of the world now. My apartment, my money, and my body. I touched the red mark on my cheek, which was throbbing in time with my heartbeat. She hit me, and you stood there. I was shocked, he protested, weaky. You were relieved, I said brutally. You were relieved she was hitting me and not screaming at you. I am not putting anyone in jail. Dad, the law looks at actions. The law looks at evidence. I am just the person who finally turned on the lights so the law could see what was happening in the dark. I am done covering for this family. He stared at me, realizing for the first time that the daughter he knew, the one who could be guilt-tripped into submission, was gone. In her place was a stranger made of steel and court orders. I turned away from him. I walked back to the dining table, which was still littered with half-empty wine glasses and the debris of the party that never happened. The cake sat in the center, a sugary monument to the truth. The black icing was starting to bleed slightly into the white fondant under the heat of the room, but the message was still legible. Only legal owner. I picked up the silver cake server. I picked up the knife. With a steady hand, I cut a single, perfect square from the center of the cake. I made sure to cut the piece that contained the words, legal owner. I lifted it out, the layers of sponge and buttercream holding together perfectly, and placed it into a small plastic takeout box I had brought in my bag for this exact purpose. It was a souvenir, a trophy, a piece of evidence that was both sweet and bitter. Next to the cake, the blue folder, the joint ownership agreement Elaine had tried to force me to sign, was still sitting there. I picked up a red marker from the sideboard, one Elaine used for labeling leftovers. I uncapped it. I flipped the folder open to the signature page. I did not sign my name. Instead, I wrote in large, block letters across the entire page, I refuse. No other copy exists. I dated it. I timed it. Then, I looked directly at the camera hidden on the bookshelf. I held the page up to the lens for 3 long seconds, ensuring the refusal was documented in high definition on the cloud server. I placed the folder back on the table, right next to the mutilated cake. The camera is still rolling. Dad, I said without looking back at him, do not try to forge it later. I picked up my purse. I picked up the small box with my slice of cake. I walked toward the front door. Dylan was still standing in the kitchen doorway. He looked at me. Then he looked at his father weeping in the chair. He raised his beer bottle in a silent, somber toast to me. He knew. He understood. He was trapped here, but he respected that I had chewed my leg off to get free. I walked out onto the front porch. The night air was cool and crisp, a sharp contrast to the suffocating heat inside the house. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with oxygen that felt cleaner than it had in years. Natalie? The voice came from the shadows of the porch swing. It was Kayla. She was sitting with her knees pulled up to her chest, hugging herself. She looked younger than her 28 years. She looked like a child who had just found out Santa Claus was actually a burglar. I stopped, my hand on the railing. Kayla, is Mom? She hesitated, her voice trembling. Is she really going to be charged? Are you really going to let this go to court? She was still looking for a loophole. She was still hoping that the big sister would swoop in, fix the mess, pay the bail, and make the scary reality go away. I looked at her. I saw the sister I had tried to help. I saw the sister who had watched me pay for roofs and cars and medical bills, and who had thanked me by trying to steal my home. That is not my decision, I said, my voice flat. That is the decision of the district attorney and the decision of the judge. But you could drop the charges, she whispered. You could tell them you do not want to pursue it. I could, I acknowledged, but I won't. Kayla started to cry again, soft, self-pitying sobs. What am I going to do? Nat? The bank? Without the loan? The spa goes under next week. I will lose everything. Mom said you would help. She promised. Elaine promised you my money, I said. She promised you something that wasn't hers to give. I walked down the steps, moving toward my car. I stopped at the bottom of the driveway and turned back to look at her one last time. "Kayla," I called out. She looked up, tear-streaked and hopeful. "From tonight on," I said, speaking slowly so there could be no misunderstanding, "my money does not save anyone, not Dad, not Elaine, and not you. Whatever consequences happen next, they belong to you. Do not call me for bail. Do not call me for rent. The bank is closed." I didn't wait for her response. I got into my car. I locked the doors. I drove away from the house. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I kept my eyes on the road ahead, watching the white lines flash by, leading me back to the highway, back to the city, back to the life that was legally, indisputably mine. When I arrived at Lakeview Heights, the building looked different. Before, it had felt like a fortress I had to defend. Now, it felt like a kingdom I had conquered. I parked in my assigned spot, Unit 17B. I took the elevator up. I walked into my apartment. I closed the heavy front door. I turned the deadbolt. Click. Then I engaged the secondary chain lock I had installed myself. Slide. 2 locks, 2 barriers between me and the world I had just left. I hung my coat on the back of the chair. The apartment was quiet. It was a profound, deep silence. For years, I had feared this silence, thinking it meant I was isolated. I had thought silence was the sound of being unloved. But tonight, standing in the center of the living room I had paid for, surrounded by the walls that shielded me, I realized I had been wrong. This wasn't the silence of loneliness. This was the silence of peace. This was the silence of a space that belonged to the right person. There were no hidden cameras here. There were no forged documents in the drawers. There were no whispers of guilt. I walked to my desk. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. I logged into my secure email client. I composed a new message to Marcus. Subject: Evidence File. Incident Report. 2948. Attachment: Living Room Cam 1.mp4. Dining Cam 2.mp4. Cake Close-Up. JPG. Audio to log. Wave. I typed the body of the email. It didn't need to be long. Marcus didn't need emotions. He needed ammunition. Marcus. Here is everything. The video clearly shows the assault. The audio confirms the intent to defraud. The police report has been filed. Proceed with the permanent restraining order. I want no contact. I want full severance. Tonight, they hit me again. This time, the law saw it. Natalie. I hit send. I watched the progress bar load. Sent. It was done. The legal machinery was now in motion, grinding forward with a force that Elaine's tears and my father's guilt could not stop. Finally, I sat down at my small kitchen table. I placed the plastic takeout box in front of me. I opened the lid. The slice of cake looked a little battered from the drive, but the text was still there. Only legal owner. I picked up a small fork. I was exhausted. My cheek was throbbing. My adrenaline was crashing, and my heart felt bruised, but my mind was clear. I took a bite. The frosting was sweet, sugary vanilla that coated my tongue, but beneath the sugar, there was the taste of the dark chocolate ink. It was rich. It was solid. I ate the word owner. It was the best birthday cake I had ever tasted. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I wasn't a victim. I wasn't a bank. I was Natalie Pierce, and I had just survived my 32nd birthday by giving myself the only gift that mattered, my freedom. 32 was going to be a good year. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear your thoughts. Are you listening to this on YouTube or somewhere else? Please leave a comment below to share your perspective, and do not forget to subscribe to the Lila Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button so more people can hear this story and learn how to stand up for themselves.